All right, you know what that sound is, and you know what time it is. Yeah, Neil Ratnock here with a story. All right, so this coming week, the week of March 11th, 1972, Neil Young had the #1 album in the United States with Harvest. And today, I thought I would tell you a few things about the album that you might not know. But as usual, a little background first. Yeah, okay. Now, by the fall of 1970, each of the members of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young had released high-profile solo albums. But for Neil Young, it was 1972 and the release of the album Harvest that brought him superstardom and a #1 hit with the song Heart of Gold. Now, in the fall of 1970, Neil began a solo acoustic tour of North America, and near the end of the tour in February of 71, he was scheduled to be on the Johnny Cash Show. Now, Young had been writing new material on the tour and decided to do one of his new songs on the show. Picked kind of a strange song. The song he picked was The Needle and the Damage Done, which was inspired by the heroin addiction of his friend and bandmate from Crazy Horse, Danny Whitten. Now, Whitten died about a year later of a heroin overdose later in 1972. But Neil introduced the song this way at a concert in 1971. Ever since I left Canada about 5 years ago or so and moved down south, found out a lot of things that I didn't know when I left. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Got to see a lot of great musicians before they happened, before they became famous, you know, when they were just gigging, 5 and 6 sets a night, things like that. And I got to see a lot of them, great musicians who nobody ever got to see, for one reason or another. But for strangely enough, the real good ones that you never got to see was because of heroin. And that started happening over and over. Then it happened to someone that everybody knew about. So I just wrote a little song. Yeah, very sad for Neil because he was close to Danny and he had actually told Danny to leave and go to LA like when it was really bad. And he got a call like the day later saying that Danny had OD'd on heroin. At any rate, okay, The Needle and the Damage Done. Now, Young had arrived in Nashville a few days before the taping of the Johnny Cash Show, and producer Elliot Mazer had recently opened Quadraphonic Sound Studios in Nashville and invited Young to breakfast a few days before the show to convince him to record his new project in the studio. Now, Neil admired the work of the local studio musicians known as Area Code 615, who had recorded there, so he was familiar with the sound of the studio, and he was into it. And Young had a batch of new songs that he'd been performing on the road, and he told Mazer all that he needed was a bassist, drummer, and pedal steel guitarist. Don't forget, he was on tour doing a solo acoustic guitar. So on top of that, he told Elliot he wanted to start recording that night. Now, it happened to be a Saturday, and since many of the Area Code 615 musicians were typically working on a Saturday night in Nashville, Mazer had to scramble to find musicians to help out Young. So he found Kenny Buttrey and bassist Tim Drummond, who just happened to be walking down the street. And then he got steel guitarist Ben Keith. That night, they laid down some basic tracks, including the track for one of my favorite songs on the album, Old Man. I guess because I'm an old man now and I can relate to the song. All right, at any rate, the song Old Man was inspired by Louis Avila, who was the caretaker of the Broken Arrow Ranch, which Neil eventually bought. Now, Avila took Young on a tour of the ranch, and he asked how such a young man could afford an expensive place like the ranch. Neil, who had just turned 25, looked Louis in the eye and said, "Just lucky, Louis. Just real lucky." I don't know about that. I think he was pretty talented too. Okay, now both James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt were also in Nashville for the Cash show, and Mazer invited them to the sessions. As a matter of fact, James Taylor is credited with playing guitar banjo on the tune Old Man. Now, Taylor, who along with Ronstadt were convinced to record backing vocals for Young's song Heart of Gold, saw the banjo, which belonged to Neil, and started playing it. And does anybody know why it was called a guitar banjo? Well, it was called that because it was a banjo with guitar tuning. Now, and finally, Neil wrote his classic tune from that album, Heart of Gold, on an acoustic guitar, mainly because he was suffering from a back injury and couldn't stand for long periods of time, so playing his electric guitar was out, and he went back to sitting and playing the acoustic. Now, I'll tell you a funny story to close my little talk today about the song. Bob Dylan had been a big fan of Neil's until Young released that tune. According to Dylan, the only time it bothered me that someone sounded like me when I was living in Phoenix, Arizona in about 72, and the big song at the time was Heart of Gold. I used to hate it when it came on the radio. I always liked Neil Young, but it bothered me every time I listened to Heart of Gold. I think it was up at #1 for a long time, and I'd say, shit, that's me. If it sounds like me, it should as well be me. All right, that's it. That's my story for today. Have a great rest of the weekend. Up here in Woodstock here, I'll show you. We had some snow last night, so it's winter wonderland. Just beautiful out here today. I had to shovel this morning, but that's okay. All right, that's it for today. At any rate, Neil Ratner Rock Doc. I'll join you again sometime, maybe during the week, maybe next weekend for another story. Have a great rest of the weekend. Oh, I can't forget, of course, my book. Rock Doc, available on Amazon in all formats. Or go to my website, www.neilratnerrockdoc.com. Order the book from the website. I'll autograph it any way you want. All right, that's it for today. Neil Ratner Rock Doc. Let me play my thing one more time. And I'll see you all soon. Have a great rest of the weekend. Bye.